How many of you remember the Reverend Robert Schuller and his Crystal Cathedral here in Southern California? Or how many of you watched his Hour of Power TV show on Sundays? Thanks for joining me on my tours of cemeteries, gravesites, memorials, and final resting places of the famous and infamous people who are gone but not forgotten. That's what the Crystal Cathedral looks like today. It's currently under construction. It's no longer, I don't think it's called the Crystal Cathedral, it's called the Christ Cathedral. Robert Schuller left the church about 5 years before he died. It's now owned by the Catholic Church. In 1981, when the Crystal Cathedral first opened, it was considered to be the largest glass building in the world. And I love architecture, so right after it opened, I made a trip here to visit, and I took pictures of the outside, and I took a tour of the inside, and it was really impressive. But today I'm back not to visit the cathedral, which actually appears to be closed and under construction, but I'm here to visit the final resting place of Reverend Robert Schuller, who's buried here at the Cathedral Memorial Garden Cemetery. There are also two other famous people buried here that I wanted to visit as well. The grounds have changed quite a bit since the first time I was here back in the 1980s. I don't think I've been back since, really. I don't remember the memorial gardens here at all. It's possible they were here and I didn't notice. But of all the graves I've seen, Robert Schuller's is probably one of the most modest. It's right here, just as soon as you come in the Memorial Gardens. It's the first private area here to the left. And you can see it's a very modest headstone. For those of you who aren't familiar with Reverend Robert Schuller, he was a televangelist and a best-selling author, and he had a TV show called The Hour of Power. He moved to Orange County in 1955 to start his ministry, and when he couldn't find a location, he rented a drive-in theater. I believe it was on this very spot, and on Sunday mornings, he would preach from the top of the snack bar at the drive-in theater. His church turned out to be successful, and in 1961, he built on this site the first walk-in or drive-in church. I believe it was the first of its kind in the country. Then in 1970, he became the first pastor to televise a weekly service, which was the Hour of Power. And then in 1980, he commissioned one of the most famous architects in the world, Philip Johnson, to design the Crystal Cathedral. As a televangelist, he was a real pioneer. He was one of the most successful and famous televangelists of all time. And there have been quite a few very famous televangelists over the years. I'm glad to see that he is buried here in the shadow of the church that he founded all those years ago. And then Marie Callendeer, who founded the Marie Callendeer restaurant chain, is cremated and interred right here in the corner. And then Roger Williams, who is considered one of the most popular pianists of all time, and he used to play here on the Hour of Power and in the cathedral. I believe it's the very first private mausoleum that you come to if you make a right as soon as you come down here into the gardens. So from Robert Schuller's gravesite, let's walk over and take a look inside the doors of Roger Williams's private mausoleum, which has a beautiful glass door. And in fact, it's the only mausoleum I think I've ever seen that has double glass doors that you can see right into the mausoleum. If you ever watched the Hour of Power TV show like I did, and millions of other people did for decades, then you're probably familiar with Roger Williams, the pianist who played on the program. In 1955, which is kind of interesting because it was the same year that Schuller started his church here in Southern California, Roger Williams recorded a song called Autumn Leaves. The song became #1 and sold more than 2 million copies. Then in 1966, he had a top 10 hit with the song Born Free from the movie. Billboard ranks him as the top-selling piano recording artist in history with 18 gold and platinum albums. He was also known as the pianist to the presidents because he played for 9 different U.S. administrations, starting with Harry Truman's administration. Now, of the 3 famous people that I know of who are buried in this very small cemetery, Marie Callendeer seems to have the best view of the cathedral from her final resting place. She was cremated, and her ashes are interred in this columbarium, which is fortunately unlocked today, so we can go inside and take a closer look. What I find interesting about Marie Callendeer being interred here is the connection she had with Robert Schuller as well. If you ever watched the Hour of Power, you know that his sermons primarily were about the power of positive thinking. I believe a lot of that came from Norman Vincent Peale. I seem to remember that a lot of what he preached was the whole Horatio Alger, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, rags to riches story. In fact, his was definitely a rags to riches story, and so was Marie Callendeer's. In the 1930s, Marie Callendeer and her husband Cal and her son Don all lived in a trailer park in Huntington Beach. In order to make ends meet, she baked pies, and her son Don would deliver them on his bicycle to some of the nearby restaurants. Over the years and over the decades, the small pie baking business that Marie started became a huge success. It eventually grew into a chain of restaurants nationwide, and in 1986 was reportedly sold for $80 million. For those of you that are interested, I'm going to walk around the campus for a little bit and show you some of the highlights. The architecture is amazing. There are also many beautiful statues, monuments, water features and fountains, beautiful landscaping. It has lots of interesting history. This is a sculpture of Job, and it's one of the first things you see on your way into the cemetery. And this is just one of the many water features. It's located on the other side of the walkway from the Millennial Memorial Wall, which is just on the back side of the crypts and columbariums in the Memorial Garden. And in this small memorial garden, right next to the little waterfall, is one of the many statues that you find as you roam around the campus. This religious figure walking on water is pretty impressive. And I think we all know who this is. And this very modern stainless steel building looks more like a sculpture than a piece of architecture. And it definitely wasn't here when I visited back in the 1980s. What I really love about this building is because it's made of reflective glass, it looks different from every angle, and it changes throughout the day depending on the light and the sun, the clouds, the weather. And the Tower of Hope building, built in 1968, is still very impressive as well. Even though this is a religious campus, in a way it's also a museum to the history of modern architecture in the U.S. This is the view of the cathedral from the backside, and you can see just how dramatically different the lighting is than it is from the other side. And here's another very attention-getting modern fountain. And even the landscaping is dramatic. This seagrass is a bit mesmerizing as you watch it blowing in the wind. No matter where you are in the grounds, you can easily find a very peaceful and tranquil place to meditate and reflect. The Christ Cathedral is located right on the corner of Lewis Street and Chapman Avenue in Garden Grove, and Disneyland is just a few miles down the street, 5 minutes or so away. If you remember any of the people that I visited today, please leave a comment down below. And if you like this video, please share it with a friend, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe. And I'll hope to see you again next time.